first found you on Joanna Penn's podcast, The Creative Pen. I found you at a moment when honestly I was just really struggling to think of ways that I could maybe jumpstart my own author process.
Okay.
And you talked about the idea of getting your books into libraries, and how that had been a way for you to kind of offset some of the costs associated with publishing, and that it's a profitable endeavor for you. And every time I hear the word profitable, my bat sensors go off, and I think this is something I need to pay attention to.
Right.
I'd already been kind of thinking about libraries, so I did a search and I found your podcast. But before we start getting nitty gritty into the details, talk with me a little bit about how you came to find libraries as a source where you wanted to get your books, and frame up why that was a valuable use of your time.
That's a great start off question, Jody. What happened to me? I had written my memoir. And right after I had written it, I guess because I'd contacted a lot of friends and family, I thought, great sales on Amazon.
Yeah.
Well, after all of the excitement died down, I noticed that my sales looked more like a roller coaster monthly on Amazon.
Yeah.
And so I wanted a little bit more control and a better feel for my book sales. So I looked at three sources initially. I looked at bookstores. I contacted some independent bookstores, and one of the things they wanted to do was they'd say, well, Eric, let's say I buy 20 of your books. If I only sell 5, you'll have to buy the other 15 back.
Yep.
i.e. a consignment.
Basically consignment, exactly.
That wasn't appealing to me at all, because now I'm carrying inventory and I don't know if I'm going to have to buy the books back or not. I also looked at book clubs.
Yep.
And I contacted one of the largest female book clubs in the country.
Yep.
And what I discovered, Jody, was typically large book clubs pick their books about a year in advance.
Oh,
and
wow.
So I had made my contact in December, and that particular book club had already made their decision for the entire year.
Wow.
So my third option, I thought about libraries. And when I first started, self-publishers had a black eye in the library market because of poorly written works.
Yes,
and I think
absolutely.
You spoke to that on one of your podcasts.
Still is, that's still going. It's not. We haven't gotten over that hump yet.
Interestingly, I spoke with a librarian in Montgomery, Alabama, and he told me about a nightmare that he had with a self-publisher. But I finally convinced him to buy my book.
Okay.
So when I started looking at libraries, my interest wasn't so much prestige. Mine was more of, I viewed them as representing repeatable sales.
Yeah.
So in my mind, if I got my book into one library, I would have a reference point, and that would make it comfortable for other libraries, because having a library vet your book, for me, was every bit as good as me paying $425 for a Kirkus review.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that point. Yeah.
And again, to your point, my focus was on profitability.
Yeah.
I've got X amount that I've invested in my books to write my books, and now I'm trying to look on a return on that investment. So trying to get profitable quickly, I thought I could do it with libraries, because if I had a large library system, like say here in Atlanta, if I was able to get my book in one library, I might not get them in all 35, but I may be able to get them in 5 or 6.
Yep.
So my strategy was multiple sales with libraries.
Yeah.
So I started contacting libraries initially by phone, and that just failed flat on my, I fell flat on that.
So what I want to do real quick too, because you mentioned that, and I want to go a couple of places that you didn't get with Joanna, is let me pepper in real quickly. I just went to a local library here in the Omaha area on Monday. I was taking my son to a jiu-jitsu class, and so I live kind of out in the boonies, so we're driving. I don't get to go to Omaha very often. And I already have my books in the Nebraska library system, which is kind of like all the rural communities, so good there. But as I go in and I start talking to the librarian, she says, you know what, we just don't acquire anybody that's not in the big 5. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
she was very, I'm gonna be completely level. She was entitled in the way that she spoke to me, and it was demeaning. And I thought, you know, if you knew anything about me before you made your mind up about my books, this conversation could go differently. I've got a master's in fine arts in fiction focus. I paid to have these books edited. I did everything that anybody's doing who's in the big five, except I took on the costs myself. And I think that's true of you too. What does that feel like? I want to stand there, because calling a librarian and talking to them and having them kind of talk down to you like you're stupid is hurtful, I think. Did you experience that? And what are your thoughts about how to maybe pivot from there?
Well, I did. Early on, I had a few libraries tell me point blank that they don't buy books from self-published authors.
Yeah.
And so I would just basically say in my follow-up correspondence, well, I appreciate your position. Should your position change in the future, I would very much appreciate your consideration.
Yeah.
Kind of go from there. But what
Gosh, you're
I
so
did
polite.
was I decided that numbers would work to my advantage.
Yeah.
So I've built this library contacts database, which is an Excel spreadsheet. Initially, I had 100 of the largest libraries in the US that I was focusing my efforts on. I've grown that now to over 6,000 contacts.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was
So
looking at your website and it was very robust.
I'm sorry, Jody, if I get a no or a negative response, I've got other resources I can go to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I mean, you're spot on that. Numbers is what wins this game. If you just have volume, and it's targeted volume, that works. You can't necessarily do a spray and pray method where you send it to anybody who is drawing air. But if you know that it's readers, and that's one thing I try to tell my listeners, is that libraries are readers, even though they're proxies for readers. They act the same as a reader if you can get their attention, you know, so it is targeted for you. But I guess I still want to linger just a moment before we go on, because I'm going to be getting your resources out there as far and as wide as I can. I love all the work that you've done with your database. I think that anybody who wants to seriously approach the library process needs to buy the resources that you have. They're super cheap. They're actually underpriced. I'm going to be honest with you. They're underpriced.
No, they are. I've gotten that repeatedly from people.
Yeah.
But the reason behind that, again, it goes back to volume, as you mentioned. I'm offering it at what I feel is an affordable price for self-publishers, because like you, Jody, this money is coming out of my pocket.
Exactly.
My expenses. So I wouldn't expect a self-published author to pay several $100 for my database. So the cost is low, but I make it up on the volume.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It's a great resource. So I want to talk about that. But before we do, you wrote a memoir. I want you to kind of encapsulate the memoir, but at least my sense is, and I've read your library book, but I haven't read your memoir yet. My sense is there's a lot of vulnerability. There's a lot of emotion inside of that. There's a lot of feeling inside of that. And we're feeling people. So that rejection, even if we understand it's a numbers game, rejection kind of hurts. So I want you to just stop for a moment to talk to me about that feeling you get when a librarian tells you no, and like the kind of things that you do to get courage to just keep moving forward, because that's really tough, and a lot of people can't really do it. A lot of people feel hurt too much and they kind of slow down.
Right. Well, I'll give you a good example that happened just yesterday. I started an email campaign around my latest book, and I had a librarian send me an email back with all of the library's rules and regulations. Just about every library uses what's called collection development policy, which are their guidelines for book purchasing. And so she laid out those guidelines for me. Excuse me, Jody, and I'm somewhat familiar with what they are.
Yeah.
And one of them was, we prefer Kirkus reviews. And so in my response, I said, I appreciate the update. I said, one of the reasons why I have not given you a Kirkus review is, I said, at $425, let's assume after I provide a library with a 55% discount, I only get 2% royalties. So I would have to sell
Yeah.
213 libraries to break even. So
Yeah.
I hope you can understand my position as well. So
Yeah.
I try to be as nice as I can in my response. And if I have a valid reason why they should reconsider,
Yeah.
I try to mention that and then I move on. I
Yeah.
don't dwell on it because I've got over 208 libraries that have been kind enough to
Yeah.
invest in me. And so that's what keeps me going. The wins
Absolutely.
are my uplifting moment, if you will, versus the down moments when a library rejects me.
Yeah, you're unique in that way, I think. Um, I feel the weight of rejection about 10 times as hard as I do
Mm-hmm.
acceptance. Like right at this moment, I don't have a ton of reviews on my first book in my detective series, 36. Two of them are 1-star reviews. And I read those 1-star reviews and I assume they're right. I just believe it. I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the other ones are 4 and 5-star reviews.
Right.
And yet I look at those 1-star reviews and just assume they know me. Nobody else actually. Everybody else is fooled or they're being too kind, you know?
Yeah. I had a couple of reviews. One was, I think, a 3 and maybe even a 2 on one of my
Yeah.
books, and that hurt me immensely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because one was your book is priced too high, the
Oh
cost
my
per page
gosh.
is too, yeah.
Oh,
And the other sort of went into a different direction from what my book was all about. So
yeah.
I've come to learn that those numbers are gonna balance out, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Based
they're
on the
gonna
merit of the book
balance
for
out,
sure. Yep.
and that you're gonna get, if you've got a well-written book, you're gonna get more positives than you will negatives. But
Yeah.
I honestly, I try not to dwell on that, and part of it might maybe my thicker skin revolves around my history, as I spent 30 years in sales in corporate
Yes.
America, so
Yeah.
I get a lot of rejection, and plus I'm married, so
Ah, there you go.
that doubles
Exactly.
the rejection factor, right?
Yes, it
Just
does.
teasing,
You and I have
but
something in
no,
common.
I
I've
just,
worked
you
in
can't.
sales my whole
For
career as
me, I
well.
can't take it personal, because if I do, I won't be productive. I'll
Yeah.
just sit there and not get anything accomplished. So I take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes there's valuable feedback, you
Yeah.
know, in that negative feedback. Sometimes it's something that you can learn from, and then you go and do better once you've learned that. So that's sort of
Absolutely.
my approach, Jody.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate where you're coming from. You and I have that kind of similarity that I came from a sales background. The
Mm,
funny thing is that my way of uh protecting myself from the hurt that I feel when people reject me
mm,
is making sure that I'm super passionate about the product I'm selling. And so,
mm,
as weird as this sounds, I spent a little bit of time selling direct mail marketing for a company, and it was very short lived because I didn't believe in it. I didn't believe that it benefited the customer. And when people told me no, I took it really personal, and I had nothing to fall back on, nothing to be like, hey, they don't understand versus, and this is where I say it's weird, is I sold sunglasses for a company called Pugs. They're nationwide. You've maybe seen them if you've ever gone into a grocery store or a gas station or anything. And I just knew the value of those sunglasses in this
mm.
really strange way. And so when people would tell me no, I would just kind of brush it off and be like, you're lost. You don't see what's valuable here. That helps
Right.
a little bit with books for me, is that I know the inherent quality. Now, yes, I just said that 1-star reviews hurt because I think maybe they're seeing the truth, but more or less I can pick up and go every day because I know the product is good. I think
That's great.
that's your,
Great way to put it. That's what I believe, and I'm confident in what I have written, to the extent that a few, bad reviews or bad views about the book, or books, it doesn't I know I've done well with a good book. So
yeah.
that's what keeps me going, to your point. That's a great point that you just made.
Yeah. So I want to talk about something that you said a few minutes ago. You talked about discounting your book, so the libraries are buying it at half price.
Mhm.
And I want to, one, clarify, and then two, I want to dive into the numbers a little bit. But so if you have your book available through Ingram Spark, they
Mhm.
have a section of the submission process where they have the retailer price and then the library price. And
Mhm.
the library price is actually 100% higher than the retailer price. And so if I'm being honest, I'm too early in the process to understand how everything works. But if a library acquires my book directly from Ingram or any of Ingram's kind of network, they pay double what my retail price is to acquire it. But then they give me 50% of the actual price. Is that, am I understanding it right? Or are you actually selling direct into libraries?
Well, okay. I'm not sure that libraries are seeing double our price.
Yeah.
The way that I understand what Ingram is doing, when I first started, they were offering, they recommended that you provide libraries with a discount. And then
Okay.
the option they had, one was 35% and one was 55%.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, I tried 35%, and I'm looking at that as 35% off of retail. That was my
Okay.
interpretation of it. I got no sales. As soon as I clicked that button to say
50.
55%, I started getting library sales.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
so the way I believe that libraries are getting a discount, if Ingram is adding on above that 55% that they're taking out, because I think 15% of that 55 is what they keep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so price has not been an issue for me with
Okay.
libraries.
That's good. That's good.
But what I can say is if I have a book on Amazon for $10
Mhm.
and because I know I'm getting 55% taken out of my retail price for my book on Ingram, that causes my royalty rate. Let's say if it were $2 on Amazon, it might drop below $2 on Ingram. Let's say to 150 or something.
Yeah.
So what I do on Ingram is I raise my retail price a
Mhm.
dollar or more so that I'm getting the same level of royalty rate as I would on Amazon.
I got
So
you.
now my book that I'm retailing on Ingram is $11, but 55% off of that. My understanding was libraries are seeing that like what $5 or $6 price for the book.
Okay.
That was my understanding.
I have to go back and figure out what's going on right now because I think I maybe have been misreading what I'm supposed to do because
Gotcha.
I was under the impression that libraries bought books at double the price of retailers.
Right. I
And
would be surprised if that were the case, Jody, simply because most libraries have limited budgets.
right.
That's one of the reasons why you see libraries join consortiums so that
Mhm.
they can do group purchasing.
Yeah.
So they're looking at like cost very closely. And
Right. Exactly.
I would just be surprised if they were looking at price that buying books that were, over retail, say on Amazon or somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to shelf that a little bit because I need to do some more research and also say if it happens that Omaha and Lincoln bought my books. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a kind of a recent development is Nebraska library system for the rural libraries plus Omaha plus Lincoln all own the digital versions of my books. All I had to do, and this was super surprising to me, I think it's because I'm local and maybe they kind of understood that, but all I had to do was request that they purchase the copy because I'm a member of those libraries and they bought
Mm-hmm.
them pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So that was encouraging. But at the same time, like I said, I went into a library just recently that's in Ralston. So it's kind of an adjunct of Omaha. And they treated me like I was nobody. This is a challenging thing to do
Mm-hmm.
to sell books into libraries and to know how to do it well.
Right.
You have really relied on email, so I want to use kind of a bridge to the next piece of the conversation to say you talk about personalizing and especially subject lines, using
Mm-hmm.
your subject lines to capture attention.
Mm-hmm.
How much of the body of the email do you personalize when you're sending out these emails? Is it
Yeah, in the body of my emails, I will have the librarian's full name. I will have the name of the library. I
okay?
will have the salutation,
Yep.
Mr. Sperling, and then the body of the document, I will mention either that person's name or the library name to give it a customized look.
Yeah. Okay. So everyone is going to be personalized with names, libraries, things like that, but kind of the rest of the story is a little bit like a press release. If I don't know if you've done press releases at all, but it's almost similar to that in that you're subbing out who you're submitting to, but otherwise the details about you, your book, its fit are all the same. Is that true?
Similar. So
Okay.
here's my approach, Jody. I view library marketing as similar to a job search, as though
Yeah.
I were going to look for a job.
Yeah.
So in my resume or my introductory letter, I am trying to align myself in such a way that the person reading it will see that I'm a good fit.
Yeah.
So I would do a little research, let's say, on the company and find out what that CEO's vision and mission for the company would be. And then I try to show how I'm a good fit in terms of where they're
Yes.
trying to go. So I do the
Yeah.
same thing with libraries. The collection development policy being their guidelines, I try to at least put one element of a collection development policy in each of my emails. I
Amazing.
researched 10 libraries' collection development policies because I was looking for something common that I could incorporate in all of my correspondence.
Yeah.
And the one word that I found that
Wow.
I harped on was the word relevant. Almost every collection development policy that I read said
Relevant.
the book must be relevant or the book
Yeah.
must have relevancy. So when I'm
Wow.
corresponding, I'm trying to show that librarian how my book is relevant to their readership, to their
Yeah.
patrons or guests.
Yeah.
So that's my approach. And I have different emails for different scenarios. For academic libraries, I might have an email campaign geared around spring break. For
Yeah.
libraries, I have one regarding fiscal year end, fiscal year begin. I have
Yeah.
one for introductory letters. I've got one where I display my multiple books. I may have two or three.
Yeah.
So I've got a strategy that I'm able to stay in front of libraries because I'm not just sending them the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, the structure, I had an authors group in Florida. I was presenting how to self-publish. And then I talked about getting your book in the libraries. And one of the people raised their hand and said, Eric, that's a sales sheet that you're sending librarians. And I said,
Yeah.
yes, it is. But you know what? It's a metadata sales sheet.
Okay.
So that's what my document contains, metadata. It contains the book's cover. I always use Ingram ISBNs because Ingram is the world's largest book wholesaler, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of libraries buy from Ingram. So I've got the book cover, I've got the metadata, I've got the book's description,
Yep.
and I've got where they can purchase it from: Ingram,
Yes.
Amazon, Draft the Digital.
Yeah.
I got like 7 or 8. I give them all of that, and I have the personalization piece in there. So that's what I'm doing. I'm sending
Okay.
metadata in a personalized way that shows I've got some relevance to the library and what they might be looking for in a book.
And understanding of what matters to them. I think that if I
Mm-hmm.
were a librarian opening up one of your emails, my sense would be like, hey, this gentleman has really done his research. He gets what we're looking for. And I think,
Exactly.
yeah, for the hundreds and thousands of people who just basically say, hey, I wrote a book. Do you want to, add it to your collection? You've
Right.
already put yourself head and shoulders above them.
And yeah, right. And then I use library buzzwords. I use your collection development policy. I put
Yeah,
that in
love
there
it.
to establish credibility. And I'll say, here's where I think my book aligns with your collection development policy,
Mhm.
and it would fit in your social sciences section of the library.
Yeah.
So I try to show that I understand their business. I've done my homework, and I try to be courteous to librarians because studies have shown most librarians are introverted. So I don't come out at them with this hard, you
Yeah.
got to buy my book, it's the best in the world kind of approach.
Yeah.
They are introverted and they love data to
Yeah.
be able to assess information. So I'm giving them uh, a soft sell with quantitative information.
Yeah. That's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
What I really love is that you talk about being in sales for 20 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in 20 years, we learn how to talk to people. We learn how to go in and all these different strategies to sell whatever product it is that we're going to sell. Uh, and most of the time, salespeople talk about the close. but you're essentially leaving the close out of your process. And I really,
no, actually I am. I'm doing a soft close.
right. Yeah.
At the end of each of my emails, I'll say something along the lines of, upon review of the information I've presented, I would be honored if you would add my new book to your
Perfect.
collection.
Yeah.
Again, I'm using
Yeah.
collection and I'm doing that
Yeah.
soft, assumptive close that I would be honored. I don't
Yeah.
say when you order it, I said, I look forward to the prospect of you ordering it, and I
Yeah.
would be humbled by by the book's addition to your collection. So I always do a soft close.
I really enjoy you a lot. I don't, it's like as much as I try, as hard as I try, I don't have that gear in me. Whenever I think of the word humbled, it actually makes me angry. I don't know
Yeah,
what's wrong with me, man, but
right,
I
right.
gotta work on that. That's I've probably
You
ruined
could use a
a
different
thousand
word.
goods. Well,
Yeah,
no,
you
but
could use a
I guess
different
what I'm
word,
saying
but
is I just want to point out how great you are in the fact that you really put yourself aside
right.
to accomplish your mission. I'm not as good at that as you are, and I hope that people listening take your side in this, and that they understand that when you're able to sort of put yourself aside for what you're trying to accomplish, really good things can happen. And I think
Exactly.
you're doing a great job of that.
I appreciate that, Jody. And you said something that is something that I'm always thinking about when I'm working on my intro letter and when I'm working on my email. I'm trying to put myself in the position of the reader. I'm
Yeah,
trying to put myself in the position of a librarian. And I ask myself, how does this tone, how does this messaging, how would that be received by that librarian? So you make a
yeah,
great point. I actually do that. I try to consider that other person and put
yeah,
I want to sell my book. I try to put that aside and I try to portray, okay, how will Jody the librarian
yeah,
respond or react to what I've just said?
yeah. So let's take a moment to talk about the money aspect of what we're doing, because
Okay.
and this is where I'm just going to let you lead, because I had come into this with kind of the wrong perspective of the pricing of the book, and I didn't understand all of everything that was going on there. So I need to do more research. But for you,
Okay.
it seems, and I guess we're on the same page when it comes to, you don't get a ton of juice out of this particular squeeze. So there are other reasons why we're doing this. Like if you sell a book into a library, you're not going to get rich hitting, 200 libraries. So
Right.
talk to me about the wins. How much money do you make if you sell a copy of a book in? And then what are the wins that make it financially even better than we realize?
Okay. The royalties and the payments that you receive are very similar to what you get in the retail marketplace. In 2022, the Library Journal did a generational study. And in that study, and this is why I focus on libraries, and this is where the revenue begins to kind of ramp up. So, out of that study that they did, 62% of adults surveyed purchased the same book they had borrowed from a library.
I love it.
77% of millennials bought another book from an author that they had read from a book they'd read in a library. So if you're a
Wow.
series author, millennials is a big business for you. So you've got 62% and 77%. What that means is there are add-on sales every time you
Hmm.
can get your book into a library. As an example, I have 24 libraries that have purchased 2 of my books, 9 libraries that have purchased 3 of my books,
Wow.
4 libraries that have purchased 4 of my books.
Hmm.
So that's even though, so now think about this. Let's say if I only got a $2 royalty off of one library.
Yeah.
Well, the one that purchased 2 books, I just made $4. And I didn't do any additional work. And
Love it.
so that's where my revenue begins to ramp up, is because of these multiple sales. So I've got 258 copies of my books in 208 libraries.
Hmm.
That speaks to the numbers that Library Journal study indicated. If you can get your book in the library and if it gets checked out, the odds are you're going to get an additional book sale.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how I look at it. Revenue wise, the numbers aren't big, but here's what happened to me. Once people saw that I was having success as a self publisher, getting my book in the libraries, I started getting requests for, hey, Eric, can you help me with my intro letter? Hey, Eric, can I buy your database? Hey, Eric, can you consult with me for an hour?
Yeah.
So what happened to my library book business, my revenue stream had an add-on effect. Not only was I now getting royalties, I was getting library marketing services sales.
Yeah.
So that, and I'll just say that pushed me, I call it my book business, that pushed my book business just on libraries into the 5-figure category.
That's great.
Okay. But I had something to supplement my books. In addition to the royalties, I had something to supplement that.
Yeah.
So for people that write series, I think they are probably the best positioned of any to do extremely well with libraries. If they can get that first series in, the first book of a series in, then I think you can have that add-on effect similar to what I'm doing.
I love that you mentioned that. That was one of the questions that I think I moved your way before we actually had this conversation, is the power of the series author. So you really touched on that. I think about that in so many ways. I use Facebook ads to market my books, and the way that I'm able to do it profitably is largely because I'm selling a series. So I can package four or five books together and say, hey, buy all of these books together. And every time somebody makes a purchase, it's at a high enough ticket that I can afford to spend that money and recoup.
Right.
Libraries are very, very similar. I think one of the things that really excites me, and you talked about in your interview with Joanna, which I will definitely link in the show notes so people can hear that. She's more coherent than I am, to tell you the truth. Like, we kind of bounce around a lot. I do that. That's just what I do. But you talked about see, in fact, I bounced around so much I lost my train of thought. Give me a second.
You were talking about my podcast with Joanna.
Yeah, and I was thinking about, there was something that you talked about on there. Oh, right, thank you. So you talked about the power of, and you mentioned it actually. That's why I wanted to come back and loop around, is that when you get a book into a library, you have the opportunity for people to read it free and then pick up with your series. And so like the multiplicative effect of that is amazing. I don't want that to be understated. So that's why I wanted to come back around to it, is if they happen to read book one of yours in any format, if they really like it, they develop a relationship with it, they buy book 2, 3, 4, 5 without you doing anything extra, just by making it available for free. And that does lead me to my next question. This is, I didn't prepare you for this question, so if you don't have any thoughts on it, no worries. But you know how like BookBub and Book Funnel, a lot of different places will allow you to give away a book for free. And you hear the abysmal statistics about free books and how if you get an email list built on free, book downloaders, it really doesn't generate a lot. Why are libraries different? Because they're still free. So why is it different?
Well, libraries are offering books to their patrons and guests for free, but libraries are buying those books. So they're not free.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so technically they're not free.
Yeah.
So you were asking me about,
like, for the patron, it's free when they go and check it out at the library, but then the patron takes that free book that they decided to check out from the library and go and buy your next books. Why is that different? Why when they check out a free book from a library, does it create a buying behavior in them, versus when you give it to them for free through BookFunnel or BookBub, it doesn't create that buying behavior? You know what I'm saying? Does that, like I said, I didn't prepare you for this question.
No, that's okay. Well, let me just say this. I don't offer my books for free.
Yeah.
And the reason why I do that, in my view, if it's for free, it has no value.
Right. But the library on your behalf is lending it for free.
They're
Why does that create a buying behavior?
Yeah. Because they're lending it. And, I guess the reason why that library model might be different, Jody, is some people want to try it before they buy it.
Sure.
It's like a car. They may want to test drive it, kick the tires, and they say they like it, and then they make the purchase. I would think that would probably be the difference.
Yeah.
Readers are more inclined to want to try it first before they buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. My son, and I think I've maybe told this story, so I won't go too deep into it here, but when he was just 2 years old, we lived in Spokane, Washington, and I was working a sales job for that sunglass company, and I was driving all over the state selling sunglasses. So in my car, I wanted something to listen to. Music just got kind of old. I loved audiobooks. I was in a master's degree for fiction, so I was listening to audiobooks just constantly. And my son, is only so tall. So he pulls off Henry Miller, The Tropic of Capricorn from the shelf in audiobook. And I was like, it must be fate. So I took that book and I listened to it. And it was, for me, a life-changing book. It's really vulgar. So when I recommend it, I always make sure people understand it's not a clean book, but the writing was so beautiful, and the observations about life and spirituality and death and etc. Just amazing. I went on to read that book many times. My wife, as a gift, bought me a $300 copy of a first American edition. The kind of love that was created because of an accidental library loan is so powerful. And I think about that with your books. When people get your books, I mean, I've read your book. I already feel somehow like I know you because I read your book. I've enjoyed your thought process, what you've offered to the world. But I have personally not paid you $1.
You have not?
I have not paid you $1. Exactly. I didn't buy your book. I borrowed your book.
Oh, no,
so the
that's
library
fine.
did.
No, that's
Yeah, no,
fine.
I know it is. And I guess that's kind of my thought process, though, is that when you come out with more books, I'm going to buy your books because now I'm a fan of yours. Yeah.
I got you. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then, that's a great point. That kind of goes back to that library journal generational study. That relationship gets established, and then you say, yeah, I liked what I've just read. I'll buy another book in the future.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm thinking.
But the other thing too, Jody, and I don't mean to cut you off, but the other thing you've done for me is libraries, they're going to be looking at the checkouts of that book. And so now when I go back to library, sometimes I'll say, hey, I noticed this month, because I'll do just random checks to see if my books are being checked out. I can say, hey, I noticed last month the book was checked out 2 or 3 times.
Yes.
If your readers enjoy that one, I think they'll enjoy this next one. And then I get to introduce another book. So I kind of play off of those checkouts to get additional sales.
That's brilliant. And thank you for kind of pulling us into the next segment, because what I really want to know is, are there ways that you feel like you can help to get the book checked out more often? And how hard is it? So actually answer that question. I'll come back to the next one. Are there ways that you can get people to check out your book more frequently?
Well, one of the ways is to have a well-written book that's relevant to that library's patron and guest interest. Something else that's really interesting that's happened, there's a company called Hoopla that offers music and ebooks and the like, and I view them as a competitor to Draft to Digital, which used to be the #1 source for ebooks for libraries. They still may be.
Okay.
So what's happening with Hoopla, to get more checkouts, you want to get your book distributed to companies that offer Hoopla.
Yeah.
So that's how you do it. You want to make sure your book is in those places where Hoopla is being distributed, because I am seeing in my database the number of libraries that are adding Hoopla is just been astronomical.
Absolutely.
So I guess their subscription is such, the library's subscription is such, they see the value versus paying for a book directly. The challenge for authors, however, is if I have a $2 book with Hoopla, that book costs $2. If the library were to purchase it with Hoopla, I only get 40 cents.
Right.
Because their model is called cost per checkout.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got to sell 5 books, 5 checkouts to equal the price for one book.
Yeah.
The good news for me is I am getting a lot of Hoopla checkouts.
Yes.
I am getting a ton because I'm in that market space.
Yeah. And so what happens though, and I'll use this example because Lincoln Public Libraries owns your book. That's how I read your book. So I checked it out through Hoopla. So I gave you 40 cents, it sounds like. Hoopla acquired my book. And I actually don't fully understand how that happened, because I didn't think I did anything for Lincoln Public Libraries. I just submitted my book to Findaway Voices. So Findaway Voices acquired, and said like, this book is good to go. And suddenly it shows up in that collection. I was really surprised. But as soon as I saw it, I sent a thing out to all of my followers on Facebook and everything. And I said, hey, if you have a Lincoln Public Library card right now, I need you to do me a favor and go check out that book, because then you get that data, you get all that information that, hey, this book's getting checked out, plus you get money for it. So like, it cost them nothing but a few minutes. So Hoopla is really amazing, and I think it's a win for everybody in that it forces the author back into that marketing position of saying like, let's make this book visible, and let's make sure that people are engaging with it. And it saves the library money, so they can be more versatile, so that they can move easier than having to acquire a single title. I do like the Libby model as well, though, whereas Libby is going to pay me immediately as soon as they acquire the book for the price of the book. And it might just be a couple of bucks, but then it's in their collection forever. I like that.
To give you an idea, I can't think of all of the people that distribute through Hoopla, but Draft Digital is one.
Okay.
Yeah, Draft Digital is one. So yeah, I mean, literally almost every month now, I'm getting Hoopla library sales. Literally every month. Right.
Now, how active are you in that process? Like, do you notice that you just kind of show up in new places that you maybe didn't necessarily inquire of, or do you still have to really gun it to get those Hoopla sales?
That engine is driving itself.
Yeah.
The challenge with Hoopla is most of the self-publishing platforms, in their reporting, none of them have an indicator that sells L for library.
Okay.
So there's literally hardly no library reporting in terms of which library made the purchase.
Okay.
So I can't actively market, Hoopla, because most of these libraries now have Hoopla.
Yeah.
So there's no really need for me to try to market and say, oh, if you get Hoopla.
Yes, exactly.
So
right.
I don't have to do that. That Hoopla is selling themselves to libraries just like Libby was doing, right?
Right.
So that market exists, and the engine for me, it's just running on its own, Jody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just made sure that my books are available through Hoopla, either through Draft Digital, or there's several others that offer Hoopla too as well.
Yeah,
but,
like I said,
so I'm
Findaway
just making
Voices.
sure my book's available through that source.
Yeah, Findaway Voices is one of the big ones. So as soon as I submitted my book, and the funny thing is, I'm almost positive this is how it happened, but I submitted my audiobook to Findaway Voices, and they distribute it to Spotify, libraries, Apple, Amazon. I mean, the list is just massive. In fact, I'll leave a link in the show notes for it. When you submit it, if it gets approved through Findaway Voices, it's available to all these other networks. And so all you have to do is go make them aware that it exists, and then give them that value proposition that you were talking about. And I think you can be acquired pretty quickly. I was shocked that the book showed up at Lincoln, because I had not even approached them. So when it was there, I was like, what? I didn't do anything, and now I'm getting money. This is cool. So one of the things that I want to transition to is book clubs. We mentioned it early on, but you talked about it not in a library way. However, I know in my library system, they actually have a library sanctioned book club where there is part of their budget that exists exclusively to purchase books for book clubs. Have you ever explored that? And what do you see as, like, is there a way to leverage that for our benefit?
I have not gone after that as a market directly. I've actually had that market come to me.
Oh, wow.
I've had librarians purchase my book, and they'll say to me, hey, we've got a book club that meets regularly. So that's something that you can put in your correspondence. I'm willing to speak to book clubs. If you have library book clubs, I'm willing to do that. And I have done those kind of presentations for book clubs all over the country. And I call them author book clubs.
Yep.
And one of the ones in Florida was the one where the person raised their hand and said, what you're providing to libraries is actually a sales sheet.
Yeah.
So I have done that. I have presented, I have done book readings.
Yep.
I do
And
a
is that kind
lot.
of like this
Again,
where you're actually remote when you do that sometimes, or how often is
yes,
it in person?
I do. I've done all of my book readings remotely.
Awesome.
Again, because of the profitability.
Yeah,
The gas to
exactly. It's
go to
hard
the
to travel.
library, my time, my hourly rate. So
Yep.
I'll do it, and they're very open to that. And so in a lot of my correspondence, I tell you, I had quite a few Zoom calls with libraries during the height of COVID. And
Yeah.
so I had a whole email marketing campaign to say, I'm available to do a book reading or to discuss self-publishing via a
Yeah.
Zoom presentation at no
Yeah.
charge.
I love
And
that.
every time I do one of those at no charge, I end up getting like 5 or more book sales.
Yeah. I
So
love
that
that.
was another strategy of mine. Sell remotely, get as many people to come as the librarian can get, and invariably I get book sales through remote Zoom.
And that perfectly dovetails into my last question is you talked about doing that, so there may not be even a ton more to add to that, but I've been thinking a lot about services to the community. And so
Mm-hmm.
here in Omaha I can really accelerate that. So I'm doing a thing called Books for Brews, where I'm going to be partnering with a couple of coffee shops here to get them a brew of coffee, and if they buy my book I will buy them a coffee in exchange. So in actual
That's
reality,
creative. Yeah.
yeah, it is. I'm not going to make any money on it because by the time I buy the coffee for them, whatever money I made on the book is going to be enough. However,
Right.
I get this opportunity to show Omaha, hey, this guy really gives to the community, really
Right.
digs into the community. So I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
ask you, in addition to those remote readings,
Right.
how have you used community services to accelerate library buying, and is that involved in your pitch to libraries to say, hey, please buy my book because?
The only community service related pitch that I've done to date regards my latest book, in which I discuss my battle with prostate cancer.
Yeah.
And I'm telling libraries that for each purchase, I'm donating 10% to the Prostate Cancer Foundation. That
Yeah,
has been the extent of
that's
my
great.
community work. The challenge with, see, I've got 6,000 libraries that are covering probably over 37 states in the
Hmm.
US, in the
Hmm.
District of Columbia. So because I'm doing emails to remote locations, that it would be challenging for me to offer,
Yeah,
community-based service under that scenario, James.
absolutely.
I
Yeah,
could
it's
do it here with my local library, the Fulton County Library System. I could do it, but my marketing strategy is not only local, but it's kind of global in terms of
absolutely.
in the U.S.
I wonder, yeah, the thing I've been wondering about, and I don't know for sure how this will work, because for me, it's a lot more just theoretical than actually in practice. But I'm kind of wondering, what if you could show somebody that what you did in Fulton County was X, Y, and Z?
Mhm.
Then could you use that to be like, this is the impact my book can have in your community? Do you think that would improve the sales proposition?
Again, I don't know from a community standpoint, but I do part of what you just said. When I started getting books in libraries, I started actually listing those books in my email correspondence as references. And when I did a Zoom call with a library in Pennsylvania, the librarian told all of the people on the call, they said the reason why we bought Eric's memoir was because I noticed another library on his list that had the book. So my community approach, it isn't a community approach. Mine is what I call a reference selling approach.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
reference sell libraries to give the ones that I'm marketing to greater confidence that my book has already been vetted. So it's a safe bet for you to go and purchase it. So
Yes.
that's not community oriented, but I'm using libraries as references. I don't have a community strategy
Okay.
because of I'm in so many states with the
And
database.
that's also hand in glove with another question that I didn't ask earlier is when you talk about checkout statistics, how difficult is it to get checkout statistics from libraries where your books are? And what's the power of having that when you pitch another library?
I don't know that libraries would give you checkout statistics or not.
Okay. Okay.
I'm proactive in that I just randomly, I'll just think, I'll say, okay, I'm trying to sell some additional books
Yeah.
to more libraries, or let's say my existing customer base.
Yeah.
They've been kind of quiet. I haven't sold any books in a couple of months. I want to try to sell my new book to them.
Yeah.
I'll go and look at just randomly go look at their website and see if my book is checked out. And if I see that I've had several checkouts, I'll use that and say, hey, I've noticed over the past month that my book has been checked out multiple times. If you're happy with that rate, would you be willing to consider this next book?
I love that.
That's how I do it. There's no statistical data that I'm aware of, and I don't know that libraries would even share that with us or not.
Yeah. I'm gonna dig into that. I'm gonna see if I can poke around and prod a little bit and see if I can get anybody in Nebraska too. I think I live I could actually open my window just right over there for anybody who's listening. I'm pointing to the left, and throw a rock and hit my library. So I'm lucky.
Yeah,
I
your
live
local librarian would probably share that with you.
Yeah.
But other libraries that I'm marketing to, I mean, they don't know me and I don't know them. So
Exactly.
for me to ask for their checkout information, I doubt they'd give it to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it makes sense, and it also doesn't, though, because partly if I went to them and I said, hey, I'm trying everything I can to make sure that my value to you is as great as possible. And if you can show me that I'm not getting checked out, let me figure out what the problem is and see if we can fix this. Because I think that the really scary truth behind our whole conversation is, if you are living in a place that has a non-arts focused government institution, you are going to be facing constant pressure to cut library funding. I hate to say that. I'm not even making a political statement here. I'm saying if you live in a place that is politically not aligned with the arts, they're not going to want to fund the library. And what I always say is that during COVID, for me here in Omaha, this is the truth, whether you like it or not. Our mayor wanted to cut funding to the library. Jean Stothert was aggressive in trying to shut the library down for a second day out of a 7-day week. It's already shut down on Mondays. She wanted it to be shut down on Tuesdays. She was aggressive. She was fighting hard to get that done. And cutting library funding is maybe the best choice to do if we can't make libraries really integral to our community. What you're doing is making libraries integral to our community. So I hope that they'll share their data with you. I hope that if I reach out to them and make that pitch, that they'd say, yeah, I'd love to let you know what your checkout statistics are, and allow us to start tracking that and figuring out what are the ways that we can move that needle. Because anytime I can get data, I can progress. Talk a little bit about your memoir. I don't know what the exact right thing to say is. Being a survivor of prostate cancer is a hard journey. That's kind of just the beginning for you. You've faced a lot of adversity in your life. And for anybody who wants to read your memoirs, who wants to read your library book, talk a little bit about yourself, talk yourself up, let people know why you are great.
Well, I've got 5 titles available. My memoir, Not Far from the Tree, is about my life being raised by a single parent, single African-American mother, and the values that she instilled in me that enabled me to go on and achieve success academically, athletically, and in corporate America. I've got 2 titles that deal with libraries. One is Getting Your Book into Libraries, which is based on an article that I wrote, How to Get Your Book into Libraries, that was the #1 search result on Google for 2 years in a row. Out of about 20, I think 20, boy, the number of hits on that was incredible. I want to say it was like 20 billion search results. My book was #1. I mean, my article was #1 for 2 years. When the pandemic hit, Jody, I knew libraries' budgets would be cut. So I consolidated my self-publishing book with my library book, and I named it Self-Publisher's Toolkit, because I saw a market opportunity whereby if someone was new to self-publishing, one of the first things they'd want to do, other than Amazon, is like, okay, now where can I go sell my book? So libraries just seem to be a logical fit. And then my newest book, my latest book, Prostate Cancer Came A-Knocking, is about my journey with prostate cancer. So I've got 2 biographical related books, and I've got, I would say, 3 self-help, self-publishing type books of library marketing. So that's kind of my sphere right now of my writing.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think I've been doing a library series for a little while now, and part of it is me fumbling around trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And so it's just so helpful to have an expert who's already been where I'm going. I don't think that you made enough of the services you have. So I want to ask you again, what can people get on your website in terms of reaching out to libraries?
Thank you for that, Jody.
You bet.
On my website, the main site is ESEInc1.com. Eric Simmons Enterprises one, ESEInc1.com. And on there, I've got a library marketing services section where your listeners can order my library contacts database in versions of 3,000 librarian contacts, 4,000, 5,000, or 6,000. In addition, I've got all of my books available for sale. If you wanted to just purchase from me directly instead of Amazon or other sources, you can purchase all of my books from my website. And I also offer library marketing consulting services. One for an hour session, I'll just sit down and we'll discuss strategy and talk about how can we construct your intro letter to try to have the most impact, as well as your subject line. And then I offer a 2-hour session that gets into a lot more of the nitty gritty of it. So awesome. All of that is available from my website. I appreciate you, allowing me to mention that to your listeners. But yeah. And to give you an idea of the impact of that library marketing services, as I mentioned, I've got hundreds of customers here in the U.S., but I also have customers in 8 countries.
Wow. Okay.
That have purchased
Amazing.
Some of my tools.
That's fantastic. That's, I mean, and I think that's an expanded conversation, maybe for later, maybe with you, maybe with somebody else, is, we've got Canada, we've got England, we've got other English speaking communities that have libraries that we can reach out to.
I've just started working on identifying libraries in Canada. And awesome. Hopefully before the year is out, I'm going to be adding Canadian libraries to the database.
Excellent. So
I think that's a new frontier for self-publishers.
Hugely. One thing I'll say about Canada, and I don't know a whole ton about it yet. I'm really focused on just local at this moment because that's what I can touch and feel. But I feel like the Canadian government is a little bit more supportive of libraries. And again, I'm not actually making a political statement here. I want to make that really clear because I've been accused before of having political views that I actually don't have. But I just think about in terms of being an artist. If you're an artist, you probably, whatever you're selling kind of aligns with a liberal type of thought process. I was also a real estate investor, so I have feelings that way as well. But, for anybody listening, Canada, their government is a little bit more open to the arts and supporting the arts. And so I think that it could be potentially a frontier that's worth exploring.
I agree.
Eric, you are a phenomenal human being. I don't think you give yourself enough credit for what you're doing for this community. And I'm just personally really grateful. You've taught me so much. So thank you.
Oh, no, thank you for having me, Jody.
Yeah, take care.
Okay, you